The sound of shattering glass against the wall beside her head made Martha Louise freeze, her fingers still gripping the wooden spoon she had been using to stir the stew. Her husband's face was purple with rage, his words slicing through the small kitchen like the sharpest of knives as he told her she was worthless, that she could not do anything right, that even the simplest tasks were beyond her feeble capabilities. This was the third time this week he had erupted, and Martha felt something inside her chest crack wider with each venomous syllable that fell from his lips. "You cannot even cook a decent meal," Richard Louise bellowed, his hands sweeping across the table to send their tin plates clattering to the floor. "What good are you to anyone? Your father should have paid me to take you off his hands instead of wasting a dowry on someone so utterly useless." Martha's hands trembled as she set down the spoon, her eyes fixed on the worn floorboards of their cabin on the outskirts of Independence, California. The year was 1878, and she had been married to Richard for 3 years now, 3 years that had slowly drained the light from her eyes and the hope from her heart. When they had married, she had been 20 years old and full of dreams about building a life together in this rugged mountain town. Richard had seemed kind enough during their brief courtship, a merchant with steady income and respectable standing in their small community. But the mask had fallen away within weeks of their wedding, revealing a man who found fault in everything she did and took pleasure in reminding her of her inadequacies. "I am sorry," Martha whispered, the words automatic now, a reflex born from countless similar confrontations. "I will make something else." "Do not bother," Richard snapped, grabbing his hat from the peg by the door. "I will eat at the hotel. At least they know how to prepare food fit for human consumption. And while I am gone, try to clean this place properly. It looks like a pigsty." The door slammed behind him with such force that the entire cabin seemed to shudder. Martha stood in the silence that followed, her heart pounding against her ribs, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps. She looked around at the cabin she had spent hours cleaning just that morning, at the stew she had carefully prepared with the limited supplies they had, and felt tears burning behind her eyes. She would not cry. She had learned that tears only made Richard angrier, only gave him more ammunition to use against her. Instead, she knelt down and began gathering the scattered plates, her movements mechanical and precise. As she worked, she tried to remember the girl she had been before this marriage, the one who had loved to read and had dreamed of seeing the world beyond their small town. That girl felt like a stranger now, a ghost from another lifetime. The next morning, Martha walked into town to purchase supplies from the general store. The late spring sun was warm on her face, and the massive peaks of the Sierra Nevada mountains rose dramatically around Independence, their snow-capped summits gleaming against the brilliant blue sky. The town sat in the Owens Valley, a place of stark beauty where miners, ranchers, and settlers had carved out lives in the shadow of those towering mountains. She kept her eyes down as she walked along the dusty main street, nodding politely to the few people who acknowledged her, but not stopping to chat. Richard did not like it when she lingered in town, said it made her look idle and gave people the wrong impression. Martha had learned to move quickly through her errands, getting what she needed and returning home before he could find reason to complain. The general store was dim and cool after the brightness outside, and Martha breathed in the familiar scents of leather, tobacco, and dry goods. She was comparing prices on flour when she heard Richard's voice from near the front counter. Her stomach tightened instinctively, and she peered around the shelf to see him talking with 2 other men from town. "I tell you, marriage is not what young men think it will cease," Richard was saying, his tone jovial in a way it never was at home. "You imagine a helpmate, someone to make your life easier. Instead, you end up with extra work, constant complaints, and meals that would be better suited for hog slop." The other men laughed, and Martha felt her cheeks burn with humiliation. She recognized both of them, merchants like Richard, who she had seen at church and around town. "Your wife seems pleasant enough," one of them said. "Quiet girl." "Quiet, yes, because she has nothing of value to say," Richard replied. "And pleasant on the surface perhaps, but useless in every way that matters. I should have listened to my brother and stayed a bachelor. At least then I could hire help that actually knew how to perform basic tasks." Martha's hands shook as she grabbed a bag of flour, not caring anymore if it was the best price. She needed to leave before Richard saw her, before he realized she had overheard him mocking her to his friends. She paid quickly and slipped out the side door, her vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall until she was far from town. She was halfway home when she realized she had forgotten to purchase coffee, one of the items Richard had specifically requested. Panic rose in her throat. He would be furious. She would have to go back. But what if he was still there? What if he saw her and accused her of being incompetent, even in the simple task of buying groceries? Martha stood frozen in the middle of the dusty road, clutching her basket, trying to decide which option would result in less anger. A sound made her look up, and she saw a rider approaching from the north, sitting easy in his saddle as his horse picked its way along the rutted path. As he drew closer, Martha could see he was a stranger, not one of the regular faces from Independence. He was tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat. He wore the practical clothing of a working cowboy, his leather chaps dusty from travel. And there was something about the way he carried himself that suggested both confidence and a certain wary awareness of his surroundings. The cowboy slowed his horse as he neared her, and Martha realized she was probably blocking the road. She quickly stepped to the side, keeping her eyes down. "Afternoon, madam," the cowboy said, his voice a pleasant drawl. "Are you all right? You look a bit troubled standing out here in the sun." "I am fine, thank you," Martha replied quickly, not meeting his eyes. "Just on my way home." There was a pause, and then the cowboy dismounted, leading his horse closer. "Forgive me for saying so, but you do not look fine. You look like someone who has had a difficult morning." Martha finally looked up at him, prepared to politely but firmly dismiss his concern, and found herself caught by the genuine kindness in his expression. His eyes were a startling shade of gray-blue, and there was no mockery in them, no judgment, just honest concern for a stranger in apparent distress. "I forgot something in town," she admitted, though she was not sure why she was telling him this. "My husband will be displeased." The cowboy's expression shifted slightly, something hardening around his eyes. "Well, if you need to go back, I am happy to accompany you. Make sure you get there and back safely." "That is not necessary," Martha said quickly. "I have taken up enough of your time already." "Madam, I have nothing but time," the cowboy replied with a slight smile. "I am new to Independence, just arrived to take a job at the Fletcher Ranch north of town. I was actually heading into town myself to get my bearings. We could walk together." Martha hesitated. Richard would be angry if he saw her with a strange man, but she had to go back for the coffee, and there was something about this cowboy's manner that made her feel, for the first time in a long while, like perhaps she was not entirely alone in the world. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you. That is kind of you." "Owen Fletcher, madam," the cowboy said, touching the brim of his hat, "though most folks just call me Owen." "Martha Louise," she replied softly. "It is nice to meet you, Mr. Fletcher." "Just Owen, please," he said, falling into step beside her as they turned back toward town, his horse following placidly behind. "Mr. Fletcher makes me sound like my father, and I spent most of my life trying not to be like him." Despite herself, Martha felt a small smile tug at her lips. "What was wrong with your father?" "Hard man," Owen said simply. "Never had a kind word for anyone, especially his family. Thought showing affection was weakness and that the only way to teach someone was through harsh words and a heavy hand." He paused, then added more quietly, "I learned early on that was not the kind of man I wanted to be." They walked in companionable silence for a few moments, and Martha found herself stealing glances at this stranger, who spoke so openly about things most men kept locked away. There was something solid about him, something that made her feel paradoxically both safe and acutely aware of how starved she had been for basic human kindness. "Are you from California originally?" she asked, partly to distract herself from the confusing swirl of emotions in her chest. "Texas originally," Owen replied. "But I have worked ranches all over, Colorado, Wyoming, Nevada. I go where the work is and where I feel called to be. Something about Independence drew me when I heard they needed experienced hands at the Fletcher Ranch. No relation, despite the name," he added with a grin. "It is a beautiful place," Martha said, looking up at the mountains. "Though it can be harsh, too. The winters are cold, and we are isolated from the larger cities." "Sometimes isolation is what a person needs," Owen said thoughtfully. "Space to breathe, room to figure out who they are without the whole world watching." They had reached the edge of town again, and Martha's anxiety returned in full force. "I should go alone from here," she said quickly. "My husband, he does not like me talking to people he does not know." Owen's expression grew serious. "Madam, I do not mean to pry, but are you safe? In your home?" The question was so direct, so unexpected, that Martha felt her carefully constructed walls threaten to crumble. "I am fine," she said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Richard is just particular about things. It is my fault, really. I am not very good at managing household tasks." "I find that hard to believe," Owen said quietly. "You strike me as a very capable woman." Martha felt tears prick her eyes again, and she blinked them back furiously. She could not remember the last time someone had said something complimentary about her, had suggested she might be capable rather than worthless. "You do not know me, Mr. Fletcher." "Owen," he corrected gently. "And you are right, I do not know you, but I know enough to recognize strength when I see it. And I see it in you, even if you cannot see it in yourself right now." Martha did not know what to say to that, so she simply nodded and hurried toward the general store, leaving Owen standing in the street with his horse. She purchased the coffee with shaking hands, terrified that Richard would still be there. But the store was empty, except for the shopkeeper. She paid and left quickly, and when she emerged back onto the street, Owen was waiting, keeping a respectful distance, but clearly making sure she was all right. "Thank you," she called to him softly, "for your kindness." Owen touched his hat brim again. "Any time, Martha. I mean that. If you ever need help, for any reason, the Fletcher Ranch is just 5 miles north of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction." Martha nodded and walked home quickly, her heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with fear for the first time in years. Owen's words echoed in her mind all the way back to the cabin, and even as she put away the groceries and started preparing dinner, she could not stop thinking about the genuine concern in his gray-blue eyes. Over the following weeks, Martha found herself watching the road whenever she went into town, hoping for another glimpse of the kind cowboy who had treated her like she mattered. She did not see him again, though she heard his name mentioned occasionally in the general store or at church. Owen Fletcher was making a good impression at the ranch, people said. He was a hard worker, skilled with horses, and unfailingly polite. Some of the young unmarried women in town had already taken notice, Martha heard, and she felt an unexpected pang at that information. At home, things with Richard had not improved. If anything, he seemed to grow more critical with each passing day, finding fault in everything from the way she swept the floor to how she folded his shirts. Martha moved through her days in a fog of exhaustion and quiet despair, wondering if this was truly all her life would ever be. One afternoon in early summer, she was in the small garden behind the cabin, trying to coax vegetables from the stubborn mountain soil, when she heard Richard's voice raised in anger inside. She froze, her hands full of weeds, and listened as he shouted at someone about a business deal gone wrong. A moment later, he stormed out of the cabin, not even glancing at her, as he mounted his horse and rode toward town at a gallop. Martha waited until he was out of sight, then went inside to assess the damage. Papers were scattered across the floor, and he had apparently thrown his coffee cup against the wall, leaving a dark stain on the wood. She sighed and reached for the cleaning cloth, knowing she would be blamed for whatever had upset him, even though she had nothing to do with his business affairs. She was scrubbing the wall when she heard hoofbeats again, and assumed Richard had returned. But when she went to the window, she saw it was Owen Fletcher riding up to the cabin. Her heart leapt, then immediately plummeted. What if Richard came back and found him here? What if someone saw and told her husband she had been entertaining strange men? But Owen was already dismounting, and Martha could see he was leading a second horse, one that was limping badly. She went to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mr. Fletcher," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What brings you here?" "Owen, please," he said with that same easy smile. "I apologize for the intrusion, Martha. My horse picked up a stone and went lame, and your place was the closest. I was hoping I might trouble you for some water while I see to his hoof." "Of course," Martha said, relief flooding through her. A legitimate reason for his presence, one even Richard could not argue with. "There is a trough by the barn, and I can bring you fresh water from the well." "Much obliged," Owen said, leading his limping horse toward the small barn. Martha watched him for a moment, then hurried to draw water from the well. When she brought the bucket to him, Owen was already examining the horse's hoof, speaking to the animal in a low, soothing voice. "There we are," he murmured, carefully extracting a sharp stone wedged in the hoof. "That must have hurt something fierce, boy. But you are going to be just fine now." He worked with such gentle competence that Martha found herself mesmerized. Richard was never gentle with anything or anyone. Watching Owen handle the injured horse with such care made something ache deep in her chest. "You are good with animals," she said quietly. Owen glanced up at her and smiled. "Animals are honest. They do not lie about what they are feeling or pretend to be something they are not. I appreciate that." He straightened, patting the horse's neck. "He should be all right to walk now, but I will take it slow getting back to the ranch." "Would you like some coffee before you go?" Martha heard herself ask, then immediately regretted it. What was she thinking? But Owen's face lit up with such genuine pleasure at the invitation that she could not take it back. "That would be wonderful if it is not too much trouble," he said. Martha led him to the cabin, acutely aware of the coffee stain she had not finished scrubbing from the wall, of the general shabbiness of their home. But Owen did not seem to notice or care. He sat at the small table while she prepared coffee, his presence somehow making the cramped space feel warmer and more alive than it had in years. "How are you finding Independence?" Martha asked as she set a cup before him. "It is a good place," Owen said. "The work is honest, the land is beautiful, and the people have been welcoming for the most part." He took a sip of coffee, and his eyebrows rose. "This is excellent, really excellent." Martha felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. "Thank you, my grandmother taught me. She said the secret was in the proportions and never letting it boil too hard." "Well, she taught you well," Owen said. He looked at her over the rim of his cup, his expression growing more serious. "How have you been, Martha? Truly?" The question asked with such genuine concern nearly undid her completely. "I am well enough," she managed. "That is not the same as being well," Owen observed quietly. "And forgive me for being forward, but you look even more troubled than when we first met." Martha turned away, busying herself with wiping down the already clean counter. "It is nothing. Just the usual challenges of running a household." "Martha," Owen said, and something in his tone made her turn back to face him. "I recognize the signs of someone being hurt. I saw them in my mother for years before she finally found the courage to leave my father. I see them in you." "I do not know what you mean," Martha said, but her voice was shaking. Owen stood and took a step toward her, then stopped, clearly not wanting to frighten her. "Has your husband hurt you, physically or otherwise?" "Richard has never struck me," Martha said quickly, and it was true. His violence was all verbal, all emotional, but somehow admitting that felt even more shameful, as if she was weak for letting words hurt her so deeply. "There are many ways to hurt someone," Owen said softly, "and some of them leave marks that are harder to see, but just as painful." He paused, then added, "When we met on the road, you said your husband would be displeased that you forgot something. The way you said it, the fear in your eyes, that told me everything I needed to know about what your life is like." Tears were streaming down Martha's face now, and she could not stop them. "He is my husband. I made vows before God. I promised to honor and obey him." "And what about his vows to you?" Owen asked, his voice gentle but firm. "To love and cherish you? To treat you with respect and kindness? Marriage is not meant to be a prison, Martha." "You do not understand," she sobbed. "I am not good at anything. I try, but I always fail. Everything he says about me is true. I am worthless. I am useless. I cannot do anything right." Owen crossed the room then and took her gently by the shoulders, his touch careful and respectful. "Martha, look at me." When she finally met his eyes, he continued with fierce intensity. "He was wrong about everything, including you." The words hit her like a physical blow, so unexpected and so desperately needed that she could hardly breathe. "You do not know that." "Yes, I do," Owen said firmly. "I know that you made the best coffee I have had in months. I know that you are growing vegetables in soil that would defeat most experienced gardeners. I know that you showed kindness to a stranger on the road when you had your own troubles to worry about. I know that you have survived years in a situation that would have broken many people. That is not weakness, Martha. That is incredible strength." Martha was crying so hard now that she could barely see, all the pain and loneliness and fear of the past 3 years pouring out of her in great wrenching sobs. Owen pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully, offering comfort without expectation or demand. She leaned into him, letting herself feel safe for just these few precious moments. "He tells me I am stupid," she whispered against Owen's chest. He tells me that no one else would have me, that I should be grateful he tolerates me at all. He is a fool, Owen said, his voice rough with anger, not directed at her, and a coward. Only weak men need to tear others down to feel strong themselves. His arms tightened around her slightly. You deserve so much better than this, Martha. I have nowhere to go, she said desperately. No money of my own, no family nearby. My parents died 2 years ago. I am completely dependent on Richard. There are always choices, Owen said. They might not be easy ones, but they exist. The question is whether you are ready to make them. Before Martha could respond, she heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. She jerked away from Owen, panic flooding through her. You have to go. If Richard finds you here, if he sees me like this... Owen's jaw tightened, but he nodded. All right. But Martha, I meant what I said before. If you need help, any help at all, you come to the Fletcher Ranch. Promise me. I promise, Martha said, frantically wiping her eyes and trying to compose herself. Please, you have to go now. Owen moved toward the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. You are not worthless, and you are not useless. You are a woman of courage and strength who has been convinced otherwise by someone who does not deserve you. Remember that. Hold on to it. He was gone before Richard dismounted, and Martha watched through the window as Owen rode past her husband with a polite nod, just another cowboy heading back to his ranch. Richard barely glanced at him, which meant he did not recognize Owen as the man from the road weeks ago. Martha sent up a silent prayer of thanks for that small mercy. Richard entered the cabin in a foul mood, immediately demanding his supper, even though it was still early afternoon. Martha set about preparing food, moving carefully and quietly, trying to be invisible. But she felt different somehow, as if Owen's words had planted a seed deep inside her that was beginning to take root. Over the following days, Martha replayed their conversation again and again in her mind. She found herself noticing things about her life with Richard that she had been too beaten down to see clearly before. The way he never thanked her for anything. The way he took pleasure in finding fault even when she knew she had done something well. The way he spoke to her in public, always with subtle digs and implications that she was a burden he bore with noble patience. She also began to notice other things. Richard was gone more often than usual, sometimes not coming home until very late at night. When she tentatively asked where he had been, he snapped that his business was none of her concern, and maybe if she focused more on her own inadequacies, she would not have time to question him. But Martha had lived with Richard long enough to know his patterns, and something was different. There was a nervous energy about him, a furtiveness that set off alarm bells she had learned to trust. 2 weeks after Owen's visit, Martha was in town purchasing thread when she overheard 2 women talking in low voices near the fabric display. I heard Richard Louise has been seen going into Violet's establishment quite frequently, one of them said. Oh, everyone knows he spends his evenings there, the other replied. I feel sorry for his poor wife. Imagine knowing your husband prefers the company of saloon girls to coming home to you. Martha felt the floor tilt beneath her feet. Violet's was the saloon at the edge of town, the one with rooms upstairs where certain women entertained male customers. She had known Richard drank there occasionally, but she had not realized he was a regular visitor, and she certainly had not known about the upstairs rooms. She left the store without purchasing the thread, walking home in a daze. Part of her felt humiliated, knowing that the women of independence pitied her. But another part, the part that Owen's kindness had awakened, felt something different. Anger. If Richard found her so worthless, if he sought comfort and companionship elsewhere, then what right did he have to keep her trapped in this miserable existence? That night, Richard came home smelling of cheap perfume and whiskey. He did not even try to hide it, stumbling through the door and collapsing into a chair. Where have you been? Martha asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Richard looked at her with bleary, contemptuous eyes. What business is it of yours? You are my husband, Martha said. I think I have a right to know if you are spending your time and our money at Violet's saloon. His face darkened with rage, and he lurched to his feet. How dare you question me? How dare you when you are the reason I seek entertainment elsewhere? If you were any kind of wife, if you were not so pathetically inadequate in every possible way, perhaps I would want to come home. So it is my fault that you visit prostitutes? Martha asked, and she barely recognized her own voice. When had she become brave enough to speak to him this way? Yes, Richard hissed, advancing on her. It is your fault, all of it. You are a cold, useless woman who cannot even fulfill her most basic duties as a wife. I should throw you out and find someone worthy of my name and position. Then why do you not? The question emerged before Martha could stop it, and she saw shock flicker across Richard's face. She had never challenged him like this, had never stood up for herself. If I am so terrible, so worthless, why do you keep me here? Because you are my wife, Richard snarled. Mine. And I will not be made a laughingstock by having you leave. What would people think? That I could not control my own woman? That I was inadequate somehow? He grabbed her arm roughly. You will stay here, and you will keep your mouth shut, and you will be grateful that I tolerate your presence at all. Do you understand me? Martha looked at his hand on her arm, then up at his face, and something inside her snapped. She wrenched her arm free with more strength than she knew she possessed. No. What did you say? I said no. Martha took a step back, her heart hammering, but her voice steady. I will not be grateful for being treated like dirt beneath your boots. I will not accept being called worthless and useless when I have done nothing but try to be a good wife to you. And I will not stay in a marriage where I am neither loved nor respected. Richard's face turned purple, and for a moment Martha thought he might actually strike her. But instead he laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. And where will you go? You have nothing. You are nothing. No one will take you in. No one will hire you. You will starve on the street, and when you come crawling back, begging for forgiveness, I will make you regret this moment for the rest of your life. Maybe, Martha said, and was amazed to find that she felt calm, almost peaceful despite her racing heart. But I would rather take my chances out there than spend one more day being told I am worthless by a man who does not even have the decency to honor his own marriage vows. She walked past him to the bedroom, pulled out the small carpet bag she had brought with her when they married, and began packing her few personal belongings. Richard followed, alternating between threats and mockery, telling her she would not last a day on her own, that she would realize how good she had it once she was homeless and helpless. But Martha kept packing, kept moving, kept breathing. When her bag was full, she walked out of the bedroom, through the kitchen, and toward the door. Richard grabbed her arm again, his grip painful. If you walk out that door, you are never coming back, he said. Do you hear me? I will divorce you for abandonment. You will be ruined. No decent person will associate with you. Martha looked at him one last time, this man who had spent 3 years systematically destroying her sense of self-worth, and felt nothing but pity. I do not care. Goodbye, Richard. She pulled free and walked out into the night. It was fully dark now, the summer stars blazing overhead in the clear mountain air. Martha had no plan, no clear destination in mind, but her feet seemed to know where to go. North, toward the Fletcher Ranch, toward the one person who had shown her kindness and respect, who had told her she was strong when she felt weakest. The walk was 5 miles, Owen had said. In the dark, on unfamiliar roads, it might take her several hours. Martha did not care. She walked steadily, her carpet bag growing heavier with each step, but she did not stop. Behind her, she heard Richard shouting, but he did not follow. He probably assumed she would turn back once the reality of her situation set in. He was wrong. The night was cool and beautiful, and with each step away from the cabin, Martha felt the weight on her chest lighten slightly. She was terrified, certainly. She had no idea what would happen to her, whether Owen would even be willing to help, whether she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. But she also felt something she had not experienced in years. Hope. The sky was just beginning to lighten with the first hints of dawn when Martha finally saw the buildings of the Fletcher Ranch rising from the darkness. She was exhausted, her feet blistering, her arms aching from carrying the bag. But she had made it. The ranch house was dark, and Martha stood at the end of the long drive, suddenly unsure. What was she doing here? It was barely past dawn, and she was about to wake an entire household of strangers to beg for help. But before she could turn back, she saw a figure emerge from the barn, a lantern in hand. As he came closer, Martha recognized Owen's tall form, and relief flooded through her so powerfully she felt her knees buckle. Owen saw her and broke into a run, reaching her just as she swayed. Martha, my God, what happened? Did you walk all the way from town? I left him, Martha said, and hearing the words aloud made them real in a way they had not been before. I left Richard. I did not know where else to go. You said if I needed help, Of course, Owen said immediately, taking her carpet bag and putting his arm around her shoulders to support her. Come on, let's get you inside. You must be exhausted. He led her not to the main ranch house, but to a smaller cabin nearby. I live here, he explained. It is not much, but it is private. You can rest, and then we will figure out what to do next. The cabin was small but tidy, with a simple bed, a table, and a stove. Owen helped her to a chair and immediately set about building up the fire and putting coffee on to heat. Martha watched him move around the space with the same gentle competence he had shown with his horse and felt tears prick her eyes again. I am sorry, she said. I should not have come here. I am putting you in an awkward position. Martha, stop, Owen said firmly, bringing her a cup of water. Drink this, and then I want you to listen to me. You did the right thing by leaving. You were incredibly brave, and you can stay here as long as you need to. I will sleep in the barn, so everything is proper, and your reputation is protected as much as possible. My reputation is probably already destroyed, Martha said bitterly. Richard will make sure everyone knows I abandoned him. I will be an outcast. Owen crouched down beside her chair so he could look up into her face. Some people will judge you, yes, but the people worth knowing will understand that you did what you had to do to survive. And I will make sure everyone knows that you left, because your husband was cruel to you, not because you did anything wrong. Why are you being so kind to me? Martha whispered. You barely know me. Owen's gray-blue eyes were steady and serious. I told you before, I recognize strength when I see it. But also, Martha, I need to be honest with you about something. From the moment I met you on that road, something in me knew you were special. I have thought about you every day since then. I know the timing is terrible, and I know you are going through something incredibly difficult. But I want you to know that you are not alone. I am here, and I am not going anywhere. Martha's breath caught in her throat. Owen, I am still married. Even if I never go back to Richard, in the eyes of the law and the church, I am still his wife. I know, Owen said, and I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give. But I also know that marriages can be dissolved, especially when there are grounds like cruelty and abandonment of duty. It will not be easy, and it will not be quick, but it is possible. I have no money to hire a lawyer, Martha said helplessly. We will figure it out, Owen said, one step at a time. For now, you need rest. You have been through an ordeal tonight. He stood and moved toward the door. I will give you privacy. There is food in the cupboard and water in the pitcher. Sleep as long as you need to. Owen, Martha called as he reached the door. When he turned back, she said softly, Thank you for believing in me when I could not believe in myself. Owen's smile was gentle and warm. Always, Martha, always. Martha woke late in the afternoon to find the sun streaming through the cabin window and the sound of voices outside. For a moment, she was disoriented, unsure where she was, and then the events of the previous night came flooding back. She sat up slowly, every muscle in her body aching from the long walk. There was a soft knock at the door, and a woman's voice called, Mrs. Louise, my name is Sarah Fletcher. May I come in? Martha quickly smoothed her hair and called out that yes, she could enter. The woman who stepped through the door was perhaps 40, with kind eyes and capable hands. She carried a tray with food and fresh coffee. Owen told me what happened, Sarah said, setting the tray on the table. I am the ranch owner's wife, and I want you to know you are welcome here. My husband and I will do whatever we can to help you. That is very generous, Martha said, overwhelmed by the kindness of these strangers. I do not want to be a burden. You are not a burden, Sarah said firmly. Any woman brave enough to leave an abusive situation deserves support, not judgment. Now, eat something. You must be starving. And then, if you feel up to it, we can talk about what comes next. As Martha ate, Sarah sat with her, and they talked. Sarah's own story was surprisingly similar in some ways. She had been married young to a man who turned cruel, and she had eventually found the courage to leave him. She had ended up in Independence where she met Thomas Fletcher, a widower with a ranch and a kind heart. They had been married now for 15 years, and Sarah had never regretted her decision to start over. It was not easy, Sarah admitted. There were people who judged me harshly, but I learned that my peace and safety were worth more than the approval of small-minded gossips. And you will learn that too, Martha. Over the next few days, Martha settled into a strange new routine. She stayed in Owen's cabin while he slept in the barn, despite his protests that he was perfectly comfortable there. During the days, she helped Sarah with various tasks around the ranch, slowly regaining her strength and confidence. The Fletchers treated her with respect and kindness, never making her feel like charity or a burden. Owen was careful to be proper and respectful, but Martha was increasingly aware of him in ways that both thrilled and frightened her. She would catch him watching her as she worked in Sarah's kitchen, his expression unguarded and tender. When their hands accidentally touched, she felt a jolt of electricity that was entirely new to her. Richard had never made her feel this way, had never looked at her with anything approaching the warmth she saw in Owen's eyes. One evening, about a week after her arrival, Owen asked if she would like to take a walk with him after supper. They strolled through the fields as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that took Martha's breath away. "I have been making inquiries," Owen said as they walked, "about your legal situation. There is a lawyer in Bishop, the next town over, who handles divorce cases. He said that given your husband's cruelty and his adultery, you would have strong grounds for dissolution of the marriage." Martha's heart raced. "But I have no money to pay him." "I will pay him," Owen said simply. "Owen, no, I cannot accept that." He stopped walking and turned to face her, taking her hands gently in his. "Martha, please let me do this for you. You deserve to be free of that man, free to build the life you want. And He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I have feelings for you, deep feelings. I know it is too soon. I know you need time to heal from what Richard did to you. But I also know that I want to be part of your future, if you will have me." Martha looked up at him, this good man who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect, who had helped her escape a nightmare, and who now looked at her like she was something precious. "I have feelings for you too," she admitted softly. "But Owen, I am afraid. I thought I knew Richard when I married him, and look how wrong I was. How do I trust my own judgment again?" "You do not have to decide anything right now," Owen said, his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "We have time. We can get to know each other slowly, properly. I want to court you, Martha, once you are free. I want to show you what it means to be cherished and respected, but only if that is what you want too." "It is," Martha whispered, tears streaming down her face again. But these were different tears, tears of relief and hope and the beginnings of joy. "It is what I want." Owen raised her hands to his lips and kissed them gently, his eyes never leaving hers. "Then that is what we will do. One day at a time, Martha. We will build something good together." The process of divorce proved to be complicated and painful. Richard contested it viciously, spreading rumors throughout Independence that Martha had been unfaithful, that she had abandoned him to run off with a cowboy, that she was mentally unbalanced and could not be trusted. Many people believed him, and Martha found herself the subject of whispers and cold shoulders whenever she went into town. But she also found unexpected allies. Sarah Fletcher stood by her unfailingly, as did several other women in Independence who had their own stories of difficult marriages. The lawyer in Bishop, a stern man named Mr. Harrison, proved to be a fierce advocate. He gathered testimony from people who had witnessed Richard's verbal abuse of Martha in public, and he managed to confirm Richard's frequent visits to Violet's saloon through the testimony of several respected businessmen who had seen him there. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, into the fall and then into the early winter of 1878. During that time, Martha and Owen's relationship deepened slowly and sweetly. He kept his promise to court her properly, and Martha discovered what it was like to be with someone who actually cared about her thoughts and feelings. Owen brought her wildflowers from the fields and listened intently when she told him about the books she loved to read. He taught her to ride horses, patient and encouraging when she was nervous. They took long walks together through the stunning landscape around Independence, talking about everything and nothing, building a foundation of friendship and trust beneath the growing attraction between them. Martha felt herself coming back to life, like a plant that had been kept in darkness, finally brought into the sun. She laughed more than she had in years. She discovered opinions she had not realized she had been suppressing. She learned that she was actually quite good at many things when she was not constantly being told she was failing. Sarah offered her paid work helping with the household management of the ranch, and Martha discovered she had a talent for organization and figures. She carefully saved every penny she earned, determined to pay Owen back for the lawyer's fees, even though he insisted it was not necessary. In December, The divorce was finally granted. The judge ruled that Richard had failed in his duties as a husband through his cruel treatment of Martha and his adultery. Martha was awarded her freedom, though Richard made sure she got nothing else, claiming she had forfeited any right to support when she abandoned him. Martha did not care. She walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than she had in years. Owen was waiting outside, and when she told him the news, he swept her up in his arms and spun her around, both of them laughing with relief and joy. "You are free," he said, setting her down, but keeping his arms around her. "Finally, truly free." "Free," Martha repeated, testing out the word. It felt strange and wonderful on her tongue. That evening, the Fletchers hosted a small dinner to celebrate. After the meal, Owen asked Martha to walk with him, despite the cold winter air. He led her to the barn, which had been transformed with lanterns hanging from the rafters and blankets spread over the hay. "I wanted to do something special," Owen explained, looking almost shy, "to mark this day." "Owen, this is beautiful," Martha said, looking around at the warm glow of the lanterns. "Martha Louise," Owen said, taking both her hands in his and looking into her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I have loved you from almost the first moment I met you. I have watched you find your strength and reclaim your life, and every day I have fallen more deeply in love with you. You are brave and kind and so much stronger than you know. I know we have not been able to court for very long because of the legal situation, but I also know that what I feel for you is true and real and lasting." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you how much you are loved and valued?" Martha looked at the ring in the box, a simple gold band with a small but beautiful stone, and then up at Owen's hopeful face. 6 months ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare, convinced she was worthless and destined for a life of misery. Now she was standing in a lantern-lit barn with a man who looked at her like she hung the moon, a man who had helped her find herself again. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and sure. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." Owen's face broke into a huge grin, and he slipped the ring onto her finger before pulling her into a kiss that was gentle and passionate and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I am going to make you so happy," he promised. "Every single day, I'm going to make sure you know how much you are loved." "You already do," Martha said softly. "You already do." They were married in February of 1879, in a small ceremony at the ranch with just the Fletchers and a few close friends in attendance. Many people in Independence still gossiped about the scandal of Martha's divorce and quick remarriage, but Martha found that she truly did not care. She had learned that the opinions of people who did not know her full story were worthless, and that the only judgments that mattered were those of the people who truly cared about her. Martha wore a simple blue dress that Sarah had helped her sew, and Owen wore his best suit, his eyes never leaving Martha's face as they spoke their vows. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Owen kissed her, Martha felt a completeness she had never experienced before. This was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership, respect, love. Owen had spent months building them a small house on the Fletcher property, a cozy place with a real kitchen and a bedroom with windows that looked out at the mountains. He carried Martha over the threshold on their wedding night, and she marveled at how different everything felt from her first marriage. Owen was gentle and patient, constantly asking if she was all right, if she was comfortable, making sure she felt safe and cherished. "I love you," Martha whispered to him in the darkness of their new bedroom. "I love you so much, Owen." "I love you too," he replied, pulling her close. "My brave, beautiful Martha. I will spend every day of my life making sure you never doubt your worth again." Their first year of marriage was full of joy and discovery. Martha threw herself into making their little house a home, and this time there was no one to criticize her efforts or find fault in her work. Owen praised everything she did, from the curtains she sewed, to the meals she cooked, to the garden she planted. And on the occasions when something did not turn out quite right, when dinner burned or a project did not work as planned, Owen just laughed and helped her fix it, never once making her feel stupid or inadequate. Martha also discovered that she enjoyed the physical side of marriage when it was with someone who genuinely cared about her pleasure and comfort. Richard had treated their marital relations as something he was entitled to, something she had to endure. Owen treated her like a partner, attentive and loving, and Martha felt her body respond in ways she had not known were possible. Owen continued his work at the Fletcher Ranch, and he was so skilled and reliable that Thomas Fletcher made him the ranch foreman before their first anniversary. The additional income allowed them to think about expanding their little house, maybe even starting a family. In the spring of 1880, Martha realized she was pregnant. She was nervous about telling Owen, worried despite everything that he might see a child as a burden, or that she might not be a good mother. But when she finally worked up the courage to share the news, Owen's reaction dispelled all her fears. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing and crying at the same time, telling her over and over how happy he was, how much he loved her, how blessed he felt. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "Our baby, Martha, a whole new person to love." The pregnancy was not always easy. Martha dealt with sickness in the early months and discomfort as her belly grew. But Owen was attentive and supportive through it all, bringing her ginger tea when she felt ill, rubbing her aching back, reading to her in the evenings when she was too tired to do anything else. Sarah Fletcher became like a mother to Martha during this time, sharing advice and preparing her for what to expect. Martha had lost her own mother before she had children, and she was grateful beyond words for Sarah's guidance and support. In December of 1880, Martha went into labor during a snowstorm. Owen was terrified, pacing the small house while Sarah and another woman from town who served as the local midwife attended to Martha. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Martha was not sure she could continue, when the pain seemed unbearable and she wanted to give up. But each time she felt herself weakening, she thought about how far she had come. She had survived Richard's cruelty. She had found the courage to leave. She had built a new life from nothing. She could do this too. She was strong, just like Owen had always said. And when she finally heard her baby's first cry, all the pain and fear evaporated in an instant. Sarah placed the tiny, squalling infant in her arms, and Martha looked down at her son, her firstborn, and felt love so fierce and overwhelming it took her breath away. "Owen," she called out weakly, and he was there in an instant, kneeling beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," Owen breathed, reaching out a tentative finger to touch the baby's tiny hand. "He is absolutely perfect, Martha, just like his mother." They named him James Fletcher, after Owen's grandfather, who had been the only kind influence in his difficult childhood. James was a good baby, healthy and strong, and Owen was besotted from the first moment. Martha would often wake in the night to find Owen standing over the cradle, just watching their son sleep, a look of wonder on his face. "I still cannot believe he is ours," Owen would say, "that we made him together. It feels like a miracle." And it did feel like a miracle to Martha, too. 2 years ago, she had been trapped in a nightmare, convinced she had nothing to offer the world. Now, she had a husband who loved her, a son who depended on her, and a life full of purpose and joy. She thought sometimes about the woman she had been when Owen first met her on that dusty road, frightened and beaten down, and marveled at how much had changed. As James grew from an infant into a toddler, Martha and Owen settled into the rhythms of family life. Martha discovered that she was a good mother, patient and loving, able to soothe her son when he cried and delight in his tiny accomplishments. Owen was a devoted father, always making time to play with James no matter how tired he was from work, teaching him about horses and showing him the beauty of the mountains around their home. They had 2 more children over the next few years, a daughter named Emily in 1882, with Martha's brown eyes and Owen's quick smile, and then another son, Samuel, in 1884, who looked so much like Owen, it made Martha's heart ache with love every time she looked at him. Their house had been expanded to accommodate the growing family, and it was always full of noise and laughter and life. Martha had never imagined she could be this happy, that it was possible to feel this fulfilled and content. Every day felt like a gift, a reminder of how far she had come and how much she had to be grateful for. Richard remained in Independence, though Martha rarely saw him. She heard through the gossip network that he had remarried a young woman from a nearby town who apparently had not heard about his reputation. Martha felt sorry for her, hoped that perhaps Richard had learned something from the dissolution of their marriage, though she doubted it. Some people never changed. For her part, Martha had no regrets about leaving him. Every time she looked at her children, at Owen, at the life they had built together, she knew she had made the right choice. The courage it had taken to walk away from her marriage had opened the door to everything good in her life now. One evening in the summer of 1885, Martha stood on the porch of their house watching Owen play with the children in the yard. James, now 4.5, was trying to teach his younger siblings how to skip rocks in the small pond Owen had dug. Emily, 3 years old and fearless, kept running right up to the water's edge, making Martha nervous. And little Samuel, just over a year old, was toddling around on chubby legs, determined to keep up with his older siblings. Owen looked up and caught Martha watching them. He said something to the children, then jogged over to join her on the porch, pulling her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, kissing the top of her head. "Just how happy I am," Martha said, leaning into his embrace. "How grateful I am that you stopped on that road 7 years ago to check on a stranger in distress." "I am grateful too," Owen said, "though I have to say, I knew from the moment I saw you that you were special. Something in my heart just recognized you, recognized that you were meant to be mine, and I was meant to be yours." "Do you ever think about what would have happened if we had never met?" Martha asked. "If your horse had not gone lame that day, if you had not come to the cabin?" "I try not to," Owen admitted, "because it makes me too sad to imagine a world where we are not together. But I also think that somehow, some way, we would have found each other. The universe would not have been so cruel as to keep us apart." Martha turned in his arms so she could look up at him. "Do you know what the best part of all of this is? It is not just that you love me, though that is wonderful. It is that you helped me love myself again. You showed me that I was strong and capable when I had completely forgotten. Every good thing in my life now exists because you believed in me when I could not believe in myself." Owen's eyes were bright with emotion. "And you gave me something I did not even know I was missing. A home, a family, a purpose beyond just moving from job to job, ranch to ranch. You gave me roots, Martha. You gave me somewhere to belong." They stood together in the fading light, holding each other and watching their children play, and Martha thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain of her first marriage, the terror of leaving, the slow rebuilding of her sense of self, the unexpected gift of Owen's love, the joy of motherhood. Life was not always easy. There were still hard days, moments when the echoes of Richard's cruel words tried to creep back into her mind, times when she worried she was failing as a mother or a wife. But she had learned to recognize those thoughts for what they were, lies told by someone who had wanted to keep her small and afraid. And she had Owen, who always reminded her of the truth whenever she started to doubt herself. Years continued to pass in a blur of happy memories. James started school and showed an early talent for mathematics. Emily proved to have her father's way with horses and spent every spare moment in the barn. Samuel was the quietest of the three, content to sit with a book or help Martha in the garden. They added one more child to the family in 1887, another daughter they named Rose, who had Martha's gentle nature and Owen's stubborn determination. The Fletcher Ranch prospered, and Owen's reputation as a skilled foreman spread throughout the region. Other ranchers often sought his advice on managing cattle and horses, and he was known as a fair and honest man who treated everyone with respect. Martha took great pride in watching him work, seeing the man who had rescued her all those years ago, now respected and valued by the entire community. Martha herself became known for her kindness and wisdom. Women in difficult situations began seeking her out, asking for advice, or simply for someone to listen to their troubles. Martha never forgot what it had been like to feel trapped and hopeless, and she did what she could to help others find their own strength and courage. She and Sarah Fletcher started a small fund to help women who needed to escape abusive situations, providing them with money for lawyers or transportation or whatever else they needed to start over. On their 10th anniversary, Owen surprised Martha with a trip to San Francisco. It was the first time either of them had been to such a large city, and they spent a week exploring, marveling at the buildings and the crowds and the ocean. But as wonderful as the trip was, they were both eager to get home to their children and their quiet mountain valley. "I never need to go anywhere else," Martha said on the train ride home, her head resting on Owen's shoulder. "Everything I want is right there in Independence." "Everything I want is right here," Owen replied, kissing her forehead. "You are my home, Martha. Wherever you are is where I want to be." In 1890, Martha and Owen celebrated 12 years of marriage. Their oldest, James, was nearly 10 years old, a bright boy with his father's sense of honor, and his mother's compassionate heart. Emily was 8, wild and free and unafraid of anything. Samuel was 6, thoughtful and gentle, always willing to help anyone who needed it. And Rose was 3, the baby of the family who had everyone wrapped around her tiny finger. They had built a good life together, full of love and laughter and purpose. The pain of Martha's first marriage had faded to a distant memory, something that had happened to a different person in a different lifetime. She was no longer that frightened woman who had been convinced of her own worthlessness. She was Martha Fletcher, beloved wife and mother, respected member of the community, survivor, and thriver. One afternoon, as Martha was working in her garden, a wagon pulled up to the house. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands, and was surprised to see a young woman she did not recognize climbing down from the driver's seat. The woman looked nervous, her eyes darting around as if she expected someone to jump out at her. "Can I help you?" Martha asked gently, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. "Are you Martha Fletcher?" the woman asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am. I was told you might be able to help me." The woman's eyes filled with tears. "My husband, he is cruel. He tells me I am worthless, that I am lucky he tolerates me. I want to leave, but I have nowhere to go, and I am so afraid." Martha's heart clenched with recognition and sympathy. She reached out and took the young woman's hand. "Come inside," she said firmly. "You are safe now. We will figure this out together." As she led the woman into her house, offering her tea and a safe place to sit, Martha caught sight of Owen coming in from the fields. He took in the scene, understanding immediately, and gave her a small nod of approval and support. This was what they did now. They helped others find the courage and freedom that Owen had helped Martha find all those years ago. Later that night, after the young woman had been settled in their spare room and the children were asleep, Martha and Owen sat together on their porch, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. "You did a good thing today," Owen said, holding her hand. "We did a good thing," Martha corrected. "I could not do any of this without you." "Do you ever wish for a quieter life?" Owen asked. "One where we are not constantly taking in people who need help?" Martha considered the question seriously. "No," she said finally, "because I remember what it was like to need help so desperately, and I remember how you gave it to me without hesitation. How could I do anything less for others?" Owen squeezed her hand. "I love you, Martha Fletcher. Have I told you that today?" "Only about 5 times, Martha said with a smile. "But I never get tired of hearing it." "Good, because I plan to keep saying it every day for the rest of our lives." They sat together in comfortable silence, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful and lasting from the ashes of pain and loss. The past was behind them, full of lessons learned and obstacles overcome. The future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. And in this moment, sitting on their porch with their children sleeping peacefully inside and the mountains standing eternal watch over their valley, Martha felt completely and utterly content. She had survived the worst and found the best. She had discovered that she was strong, capable, valuable, and loved. And she had learned that sometimes the greatest courage was in simply refusing to accept someone else's false and cruel assessment of your worth. Years continued to unfold, each one bringing new joys and challenges. James grew into a fine young man who decided to study law, inspired by the lawyer who had helped his mother escape her first marriage. Emily became a skilled horse trainer, working alongside her father on the Fletcher Ranch. Samuel discovered a talent for teaching and began helping at the local school. And Rose was still young, but she showed signs of inheriting her mother's compassionate nature and her father's determination. Martha and Owen grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered storms both literal and figurative, always emerging stronger on the other side. The house that had once seemed so large for just the two of them was now filled to bursting with children, grandchildren as the years went by, and the countless people who had found refuge and help within its walls. On their 20th anniversary in 1899, Owen took Martha back to the spot where they had first met, that dusty road outside Independence where a frightened woman had stood frozen, unsure of her next step, and a kind cowboy had stopped to offer help. "I think about this moment often," Owen said, standing with his arm around Martha's waist. "How different everything could have been if I had just ridden past, if I had not stopped to check on you." But you did stop, Martha said, leaning into him, because that is who you are. Someone who sees people in pain and cannot help but try to ease it. And you, Owen said, turning her to face him, his hands cupping her face gently, you were brave enough to accept help, brave enough to leave a situation that was destroying you, brave enough to build a whole new life. That takes incredible strength, Martha, more than you probably ever realized you had. You told me once that Richard was wrong about everything, including me, Martha said, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy and remembrance. That was the moment everything changed. That was when I started to believe I might be worth something after all. You were always worth everything, Owen said fiercely. Always. And I thank God every day that I got the chance to show you that, to love you the way you deserved to be loved from the beginning. They stood together in the fading afternoon light, two people who had found each other when both needed it most, who had built a life of meaning and purpose and deep, abiding love. The mountains stood eternal around them, unchanged by the passage of time, silent witnesses to the thousands of small moments that had woven together to create their shared story. When they returned home, their children and grandchildren were waiting with a surprise party. The house was decorated with flowers from Martha's garden, and the table groaned under the weight of everyone's favorite dishes. As Martha looked around at the faces of the people she loved, at the family she and Owen had created together, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. "Speech!" someone called out, and others took up the cry. Martha looked at Owen, who nodded encouragingly. She stood, her hand finding his automatically, and looked around at all the beloved faces watching her. 20 years ago, she began, her voice steady and strong, I was a very different person than I am today. I had been convinced that I was worthless, that I had nothing to offer the world. And then I met a cowboy on a dusty road who treated me with kindness and respect, who saw value in me that I could not see in myself. She squeezed Owen's hand. He told me that I was strong when I felt weakest. He believed in me when I could not believe in myself. And slowly, with his love and support, I found my way back to who I was always meant to be. There were sniffles around the room, and Martha saw several people wiping their eyes. But here is what I want all of you to know, Martha continued. Owen gave me a precious gift when he helped me escape my first marriage, but the real gift was what came after. He showed me what true partnership looks like, what respect and love and equality in a marriage should be. He taught our children, through his example, how to treat others with dignity and compassion, and together we have been able to help others find their own strength and freedom. She turned to look at Owen, this man who had changed her life so completely. Thank you, she said simply. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible, for believing in me when I had given up on myself, for loving me so completely and so well. These 20 years have been the happiest of my life, and I look forward to however many more we are blessed to have together. Owen stood and pulled her into his arms, kissing her to the cheers and applause of their family. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers, just as he had on the night he proposed. I am the lucky one, he whispered, loud enough for only her to hear. You made me believe in the goodness of people again. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to put down roots, to build something lasting. You are my home, Martha. You always have been, from that first moment on the road. You always will be. The party continued long into the night, full of laughter and stories and love. Their children and grandchildren filled the house with noise and joy, and Martha looked around at everything they had built together and knew that this was what life was meant to be. Not perfect, not without challenges or hardships, but full of love and purpose and connection. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Martha found herself standing once again on the porch with Owen, watching the stars emerge over the mountains. It had become their ritual, this quiet time together at the end of each day, a chance to reconnect and reflect. Do you have any regrets? Martha asked softly. About anything? Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. I regret that I did not meet you sooner, he said finally. I regret that you had to suffer through those years with Richard before we found each other, but I do not regret a single moment from the day we met until now. Every joy, every challenge, every moment of our life together has been exactly what it was supposed to be. I feel the same way, Martha said. Even the hard parts, even the pain of my first marriage, it all led me here. It taught me what I did not want, what I would not accept, and it made me appreciate what we have together even more. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who knew each other so well they did not always need words. The night was cool and clear, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled at the moon. "Martha," Owen said suddenly, "do you remember what I told you that day in the cabin, when you came to me after leaving Richard?" "You said a lot of things that day," Martha replied with a smile. "I told you that you deserved better, that you deserved to be cherished and respected. And I promised that if you let me, I would spend every day making sure you knew how loved you were." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I hope I have kept that promise. I hope you know, deep in your soul, how precious you are to me." "Owen Fletcher," Martha said, tears streaming freely down her face now, "you have exceeded that promise every single day of our marriage. You have shown me what love truly means, and you have helped me become the woman I was always meant to be. I am not the broken, frightened person you met on that road anymore. I am strong and confident and happy, and that is because of you." "No," Owen said gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "That is because of you. I just helped you remember who you already were. The strength was always there, Martha. You just needed someone to remind you of it." They kissed then, a kiss full of 20 years of shared history, of joy and sorrow overcome together, of a love that had been tested and proven true time and time again. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling through their tears. "Come on," Owen said, leading her toward the door. "Let's go inside. Our family is waiting." And as they walked back into their home, their children and grandchildren gathering around them with love and laughter, Martha felt a profound sense of peace. She had come so far from that terrified woman on the dusty road, the one who had been convinced she was worthless and had nowhere to turn. She had found her strength, her voice, her purpose. She had found love that healed rather than harmed. She had found home. The years continued to pass, each one a gift to be treasured. Martha and Owen grew old together, their hair turning silver, their steps slowing, but their love never diminishing. They sat on their porch every evening, watching the sun set over the mountains, holding hands and reflecting on the life they had built together. They saw their children marry and have children of their own. James became a respected lawyer who specialized in helping people escape difficult marriages, carrying on the work his mother had started. Emily ran the Fletcher Ranch after Thomas Fletcher retired, proving herself to be an excellent manager and horsewoman. Samuel opened a school in Independence, providing education to children from all backgrounds. And Rose became a doctor, a rare accomplishment for a woman in that era, driven by a desire to help people heal both physically and emotionally. Martha and Owen watched it all with pride and joy, knowing that the values they had worked so hard to instill in their children were being passed on to the next generation. Their grandchildren grew up hearing the story of how their grandmother had found the courage to leave an abusive marriage, and how their grandfather had helped her discover her own worth and strength. In the summer of 1910, Martha and Owen celebrated their 31st anniversary. They were both in their 60s now, still active but feeling the weight of their years. The celebration was smaller than their 20th anniversary had been, just immediate family gathered around the table, in the house that had been expanded so many times it barely resembled the small cabin Owen had originally built. "I have been thinking," Martha said during dinner, "about writing down our story, not for publication necessarily, but for our family, so that future generations will know where they came from, what struggles were overcome to create the life they have now." "I think that is a wonderful idea," Emily said immediately. "Your story is important, Mama. It is about more than just you and Papa. It is about having the courage to change your life when you are unhappy, about recognizing that you deserve better." Over the following months, Martha began writing. She filled page after page with memories, some painful to revisit, but necessary to record. She wrote about her first marriage, about the slow erosion of her self-worth under Richard's constant criticism. She wrote about the moment she decided to leave, about the long walk to the Fletcher Ranch in the dark. She wrote about Owen's kindness, about how he had helped her see herself clearly again, and she wrote about the life they had built together, about the love and respect and partnership that had sustained them through 3 decades. Owen would sit with her in the evenings as she wrote, sometimes adding his own recollections, sometimes just holding her hand and offering support as she worked through difficult memories. Reading what she had written, seeing their love story laid out on paper, made him fall in love with her all over again. "You are an incredible woman," he told her one evening after reading a section about her decision to leave Richard. The courage it took to do what you did, knowing you had nowhere to go and no guarantee of help, that is extraordinary, Martha. I was terrified, Martha admitted. I had no idea what was going to happen to me. But I knew I could not stay. I knew that if I did, I would eventually disappear completely, that Richard would destroy whatever was left of me. But you did not let that happen, Owen said. You saved yourself, Martha. Yes, I helped. But the decision to leave, the decision to fight for a better life, that was all you. Martha smiled and squeezed his hand. We saved each other, she said. You needed someone to believe in as much as I needed someone to believe in me. We gave each other purpose and meaning and a reason to keep going. In the fall of 1912, Martha finished her memoir. It was not a long book, but it was honest and heartfelt, a testament to the power of courage and the transformative nature of real love. She had copies made for each of her children and grandchildren, and she read portions of it aloud at that year's family gathering. There was not a dry eye in the house by the time she finished. Even the youngest grandchildren, who were too little to fully understand, seemed to sense the importance of what they were hearing. I want you all to know, Martha said, looking around at the faces of her beloved family, that you come from strength. You come from people who were willing to fight for what was right, even when it was hard. Your grandfather showed me that real men treat others with respect and kindness. Your grandmother Sarah showed me that women can be powerful and supportive of each other. And together, your grandfather and I have tried to show you all that love should never hurt, that it should lift you up and help you become the best version of yourself. She turned to Owen, who was sitting beside her with tears streaming down his weathered face. And I want your grandfather to know that he was wrong that day all those years ago. He told me Richard was wrong about everything, including me. But there is one thing he was wrong about. He said he was lucky to have me. But I am the lucky one. I am the one who got rescued by a cowboy with a kind heart and a generous soul. I am the one who got to spend over 3 decades being loved and cherished. I am the one who got this beautiful life, this wonderful family, this love that has sustained me through everything. Owen stood and pulled Martha to her feet, holding her close as the family erupted in applause. We are both lucky, he whispered in her ear. We found each other against all odds, and we built something beautiful together. That is not luck, Martha. That is fate. That is meant to be. As the celebration continued around them, Martha laid her head on Owen's shoulder and breathed in his familiar scent, feeling safe and loved and completely at peace. They had lived a good life together. They had raised children who were kind and strong. They had helped countless others find their own strength and freedom. They had loved each other deeply and truly for more than 30 years. And if there was one thing Martha wanted everyone to know, one lesson from all the years of pain and triumph, it was this. No one has the right to make you feel worthless. Not a spouse, not a parent, not anyone. Your worth is inherent, not something that can be given or taken away by another person's opinion. And when you find someone who sees that worth, who celebrates it and nurtures it, who helps you see it in yourself, that is when you have found real love. Martha and Owen lived several more years together, each one precious. They watched their grandchildren grow up and start having children of their own. They celebrated anniversaries and birthdays and holidays, always surrounded by family and love. They continued their work helping people in difficult situations, never forgetting where they had come from or how blessed they were. When Owen passed away peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1918, Martha was devastated. They had been married for 39 years, together for 40. He had been her partner, her best friend, her greatest love. The house felt empty without him, the world dimmer without his presence. But even in her grief, Martha held on to the gifts he had given her, the unshakable knowledge of her own worth, the understanding that she was strong and capable, the certainty that she had been deeply loved and that she had loved deeply in return. These were things no one could take from her, not even death. She continued to live in the house they had built together, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her. She continued to help others, to share her story, to be a beacon of hope for people who felt trapped in impossible situations. And every evening, she sat on the porch and looked at the mountains and felt Owen's presence beside her, as real and solid as it had been when he was alive. Martha lived to be 86 years old, sharp and engaged until the very end. When she passed away quietly in her sleep in 1931, surrounded by family, she went with a smile on her face and peace in her heart. She had lived a full life, a meaningful life, a life filled with love and purpose. At her funeral, her oldest son James stood to speak. He held the memoir his mother had written years earlier, and he read from the final pages, where she had summed up everything she had learned. "If I could tell my younger self anything," Martha had written, "it would be this: you are not worthless. You never were. The voice telling you otherwise is lying, trying to keep you small and afraid because that is the only way it can maintain power over you. You are strong enough to leave. You are capable enough to build a new life. And you are worthy of being loved the way you deserve to be loved, with respect and kindness and true partnership." "My mother's story," James said, looking out at the packed church, "is one of incredible courage and transformation. But it is also a love story, the kind of love that heals, that empowers, that lifts up rather than tears down. My father showed her what real love looked like, and together they built something beautiful that has touched countless lives." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "They taught us all that love should never make you feel small, that the right person will see your worth even when you cannot. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. And that it is never too late to change your life, to claim your worth, to demand better for yourself." My parents' love story began on a dusty road in Independence, California in 1878. My mother was fleeing a nightmare, and my father was a cowboy with a kind heart who stopped to help a stranger in distress. From that chance meeting grew a love that lasted 40 years, a family that spans 4 generations, and a legacy of courage and compassion that will continue long after we are all gone. As James sat down, there was not a dry eye in the church. Martha's story had touched everyone present, reminded them of what was possible when you found the courage to change your life and the blessing of being truly loved. Later, as the family gathered at the cemetery where Martha was being laid to rest beside Owen, her oldest granddaughter placed a bouquet of wildflowers on the grave, the same kind of flowers Owen used to bring Martha from the fields all those years ago. "Thank you, Grandma," she whispered, "for showing us what strength looks like, for teaching us that we are never trapped, that there is always a choice, and for loving Grandpa so completely that all of us grew up knowing what real love should be." The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, just like it had done every evening that Martha and Owen sat on their porch together. And if anyone had been listening carefully, they might have heard a whisper on the wind, 2 voices blending together in perfect harmony. "He was wrong about everything, including you. And you helped me see that. You helped me find myself again. We saved each other. We did. And we lived a beautiful life together. The most beautiful life, full of love and purpose and meaning. No regrets? Not a single one. Would you do it all again, knowing how it ended? Every moment, 1,000 times over. Because loving you, being loved by you, that made everything worthwhile." The sun dipped below the mountains, and the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. The family gradually left the cemetery, heading back to the house that Martha and Owen had filled with so much love and laughter over the years. They would gather there, share memories and stories, celebrate the incredible woman who had touched so many lives and the love story that had made it all possible. And in Independence, California, where it all began on a dusty road in 1878, the mountains stood eternal and unchanged, silent witnesses to the truth that real love transforms, that courage changes everything, and that no one, absolutely no one, has the right to make you feel worthless. Because the right person, the one who truly loves you, will help you see that you were never worthless at all. You were simply waiting to be seen by someone who recognized your worth all along.